Hi folks, it's Rob Flux here from Property Developer Network, coming to you for yet another Sunday session. This week's topic is all about choosing your development strategies. Now I want to use the plural here of strategies because there's several strategies that I want you to start to consider, not just what you're actually doing, but how you're going to be doing it. So we're going to be mapping out what to do and then how to do it over the next hour or so. Now, for those of you who have been watching my Sunday sessions for many moons, I should say, what you know is that this is very interactive. We encourage you to ask questions. So I'm going to get on with the show and then ask me some questions, and I'll come back and try to loop around to that as we get a little bit further into the process. Now, as I said, we are talking about development strategies, and there are actually three different strategies that I want you to start to think about. There's the development strategy itself, and that is, these are the skills that you need to learn in order for you to actually reach your financial goals and your objectives and that sort of thing. So this is what rules you're going to be applying for when you actually approach council. This is, am I going to be doing townhouses? Am I going to be doing subdivisions? This is the actual nitty-gritty of what am I going to do to get that approval across the line. So on top of the development strategy, you're then going to have your acquisition strategy. So the acquisition strategy is, how do I acquire or control the property in the first place? Now, this is quite important because if you can't control the property, if you don't have the funds to actually purchase the property, then you want to learn many of the no or low money down strategies that are going to allow you to control the property so you can still force the value onto that. Okay. And then on top of that, you then have exit strategies. So the exit strategy is then how you're going to exit the deal at the end of the project. So that's the three strategies that we're going to be talking about today. So the development strategy, this is really where you're going to hone your skills. This is understanding what you're going to do in order to, and I'll pick on an example. If you're going to be doing townhouses, then you need to understand, well, what zoning is that going to work in? What's the density that council's going to require? What are the constraints that are physically going to apply? So these are the rules under which you're going to be doing this. So the development strategy is the skills, okay? And that's what everyone wants to learn, is the skills, okay? But the acquisition strategy is something that becomes tactical. So when we're going to actually acquire the property or control the property up front, we need to tactically start to assess our situation and go, well, given our resources right here, right now, and given the resources that the vendor is looking for and the terms under which they're wanting to sell the property, how do we apply what we've got with what the vendor wants in order to actually control that property? So that acquisition strategy is going to be tactical every single time you go into a deal. And let's have a look at that. Let's just hypothetically imagine that right now you've got enough money to do the deal of your dreams, and the deal of the dreams lands. And so you put all of your cash into that deal. And so now all of your money's spent whilst you're running that project. But then the second deal of your lifetime comes along a month or two later, and all your money's spent. So the first time you're able to do that as an unconditional contract, the second time all of your resources are spent. And so whilst you're doing the exact same development strategy, your acquisition strategy needs to go, well, how do I now control this property given that all my resources are gone? So understand that acquisition strategy will be nimble and will change from deal to deal, subject to your circumstances and also subject to the circumstances of the vendor that's actually then selling you the property in the first place. Okay. And understand that in doing that, getting terms from the vendor is the key to actually get the success that you're actually after. Okay. So the more financial resources you've got, the more options you've got around how you acquire, but the less you've got, the more creative you need to be with your acquisition strategy, okay? But remember that when you are being creative, that means you're going to be letting someone else into the deal in some way, shape or form. And so as such, 50% of something is better than 100% of nothing. So that's getting into the deal. Now, getting out of the deal, okay? Now, at the end of the deal, you don't always want to sell everything, okay? Sometimes, and depending upon the development strategy that you're using, you may want to be able to exit the deal in a number of different ways. So for example, you might want to exit it as a development approved site, just get a DA and flick. If you're doing subdivisions, you may want to create the vacant land and just sell it as vacant land. Or if you're, whether you're doing development strategies or whether you're doing subdivisions or whether you're doing townhouses, you also may want to go and construct. Now, depending upon which strategy you've got, it's whether you need to construct everything or just some things. But when you're looking at that, you go, well, how do I actually get out of the deal in order to maximize my cash, maximize my profit, given the amount of resources that I've actually got? Now, your exit strategy is going to be more strategic in nature. Okay, and what I mean by that is you need to start to consider before you get into the deal how you're going to get out of it. Because if you don't know how you're going to get out, then how do you know that you're assessing the deal in a way that it's going to be profitable when you get out? Okay, and I can give many, many examples where, if you go into a subdivision strategy, for example, where it makes sense as vacant land, but it does not make sense if you build. Or alternatively, I know other areas where it makes sense if you build, but it doesn't make sense as vacant land. Excuse me. So you need to start to consider that right at the very start of the deal to say, how am I going to get out of it? Because I'm going to do everything that I can to work towards that goal as we go. Also, in looking at how I'm going to get out of it, you're really setting yourself up to reload your cash and go into the deal after that. So you want to be setting yourself a roadmap of deals. So how you get out of each deal is really important in how it's actually going to set you up moving forward. Okay, so let's start with, so I've gone through the 3 strategies. Let's go into those in a little bit more detail. So firstly, let's look at your development strategy. And I know a lot of you actually struggle with this, trying to understand the development strategy that you want to do. One of the biggest mistakes that I see is that people want to start on one development strategy because it's easy and simple to learn and they can get some cash. And then they want to change courses halfway through and completely jump ship and then go do another development strategy. Problem there is you have to go back to the beginning and relearn all the skills. So my guidance is that you just choose one development strategy and you choose one that's going to help you to scale, okay? And by scaling, I mean you want a development strategy that's going to allow you to start with 2 of something, then 3 of something, then 4 of something, then 5 of something, until you get bigger and bigger deals as you go, but you're using exactly the same skills every single time. What that means is one set of skills to actually learn. It means you can easily scale your deals with minimal new learning in between each deal, okay? You know what variables can actually impact the deal because you just did the deal before. So if you can do a 2 of something, then I'm sure you can do a 3 of something. And if you can do a 3, I'm sure you can do a 4. And so your ability to start to grow your projects in deal size and deal complexity is then just an incremental step up. Whereas if you jump from strategy to strategy, then your ability to scale your projects becomes very difficult because you have to go back to the beginning to relearn your skills. Again, sticking to one strategy means that you're going to understand your costs, and hence that means you're going to understand your feasibility because you know what it takes to actually be a specialist in that particular strategy. Okay, it means that you only need one area to research. What am I going to buy? How much am I going to buy it for? What am I going to sell? How much is it going to sell for? And so you need to also only consider one sales funnel to actually exit your stock. So this becomes critical because then your energy and your efficiency can become quite narrow and focused and very clear in how and what to do. Okay. Now, in doing so, okay, there are really only 2 development paths. There are tons of development strategy, but there's only 2 development paths where you can actually start to scale your deal complexity and your deal size, okay? So you're going to start to think about, do I want to scale out or do I want to scale up, okay? So scaling out might mean that you might start with a small splitter or subdivision. You might do, a 1 into 2 subdivision. Then you might go 1 into 3, 1 into 5, and start to grow and get larger and larger land subdivisions. So that is scaling out, okay, because you're getting larger and larger plots of land as you actually do that. The other one that scales is your multi-unit dwelling approach, or where you're doing units or townhouses. Now, you might, again, with those approaches, you might start with a dual occupancy, or you might do a townhouse to the rear of an existing dwelling. Then you're going to grow to a 4-pack, then a 6-pack, then maybe a 10-pack, okay? So that is scaling out. Or you might instead do units, okay? So units might be 2-story unit, 3-story unit, 5-story unit. So now you're starting to scale up. Either way, you need your deals to start to scale. If you're not scaling your deals, then you're not building on the skills that you learned in the previous project, and you're not growing your nest egg. You're not getting to the point where you can actually do deal sizes large enough where you can actually keep your profits. And that's really the key to the success of being a property developer, is to be able to keep our profits at the end of the process, okay? Now, when you start to choose one of those two strategies, you're going to start to look at a whole bunch of things like, well, how much liquid cash have I got? How much access, how much time have I got on my hands to actually run the deal? How long can I wait in order to have a payday? Do I have enough skills, or do I need to actually go through a long education journey in order to learn these skills? Okay, you're going to start to learn these things up front, and trying to do a self-assessment of yourself and go, okay, given what I am, where I am and what I want to do, in order for me to get to a point where I want to be financially free, and that's our ultimate goal here, I want to start to scale my deal sizes until the point where I can actually keep one as stock. Now, in doing that, okay, there's a magic number and a magic formula that I want you to start to remember. The mythical profit on cost that all of us are aiming for is a 20% profit on cost for all of our deals. So based on a 20% profit on cost, that means if you do a 6-pack, 6 of anything, so 6 land subdivisions, 6 townhouses, 6 units, that means if you sell 5, that means that you get to pay down all the costs of the project, and the 6th one is free, okay? So if you don't cash that in, then you now have a property that you own free and clear. You've got 100% equity in it and 100% cash flow in that. So that's our ultimate goal, is to start collecting those things. So hence why I say you want to have yourself a development strategy that scales, okay? So in doing that, you need to now start to build a roadmap to say, well, given my starting position and my limited skills and my limited resources, let's build ourselves a 5-year property action plan, which is going to map out how do I scale from the small deals into the medium-sized deals into the larger deals, so that I can actually start to keep stuff. So that's a 5-year property action plan, and that's something that you should actually do. Now, in doing that, what you're going to find is to get to your financial freedom goal, chances are you're going to be running multiple projects at the same time, and hence why understanding the next strategy, being acquisition strategy, you're going to start to realize that if I'm running multiple deals at a time, unless I've got unlimited financial resources, I'm going to have to start to get very creative in how I actually fund my deals. I'm going to start to have to think of alternative lending models, because if I'm not doing that, then I'm going to really struggle to actually acquire this deal and run this next deal. So in doing so, you want to start to assess your initial starting position, okay? So you want to start to understand all your assets and liabilities. You want to understand your budgets, how much available equity you've got, what debt you're currently servicing in other projects or other properties and things like that. So you want to start to take a really good, strong look at yourself as to how and where you are. Understand what cash flow you've got, whether that be from your income from your job, whether it be from rental income, share dividends, things like that. And these are the sorts of things that you're going to go talk to your finance broker about anyway. But it's amazing how many times we don't actually start to look at this for ourselves. And so my guidance to you is to make sure that you're actually doing that, and that you have a very good and clear understanding of what you're doing, where you're doing it, and why you're doing it, okay? From there, we're then going to say, okay, given my financial resources right now, I'm going to have to either purchase under traditional methods or start to look at some of these really creative no money down strategies, okay? Or alternatively, I need to find a vendor that's going to work with me, or a combination of both. So let's start to look at what some of these acquisition strategies might be. Well, there's the traditional acquisition strategies that most of us are used to, and that is we just go get a standard contract, I guess, written up by the real estate agent or the solicitor in the local area, and they've got standard clauses in there. So you've got finance clause, subject to finance and subject to building and pest and things like that. Well, there's an opportunity to say, well, I can just buy that outright with some very, very minimal risks, or I can start to do a subject to type clause. So I could do subject to due diligence. I could do subject to development approval. I could be subject to building approval. I could be subject to finance approval. So these traditional contracts can actually be done in a number of different ways that actually allow you to minimize your risk in the project. That's one thing. And two, defer the purchase to a little bit further down the line. Now, by deferring the purchase, that's going to improve your cash flow. That's going to defer things like stamp duty. So until the contract is actually unconditional, your stamp duty is typically not going to be due, and those sorts of things. So what we're doing is we're using that traditional contract, and we're using that to our advantage to push things a little bit further down the line, okay? Now, that gives us the advantage of time, and we can use that time to our advantage to force value onto the project as and where we see fit. Now, on top of that, we then start to layer some extra, extra goodies in here. And this would be delayed settlement with early access. So if you're delaying your settlement, it's still a standard contract, but by having early access, that gives you the ability to go in and perform some works on the property. Now, generally, they will only let you perform works on the property when you have an unconditional contract. And so whilst you have the ability to walk away, they're not going to want you to come in and dig up their backyard. They're not going to want you to come in and knock down their house, or pull out their kitchen and put a new kitchen in, because they just don't know whether or not you're going to complete the project if it is not an unconditional type contract. However, with something like a delayed settlement early access, there's no reason why you can't delay it, say, 12 months, when your project may only take 6 months. And that way you've got time to actually complete the works, get all the approvals, complete the works, put it on the market, and actually sell the finished product before you actually own the first product. Now, those sorts of things can be done, and that's one of the no money down type deals that we actually teach. So your acquisition strategy, just using a traditional contract, will allow you some flexibility to defer some of those costs, and sometimes even defer, minimize, and sometimes even avoid costs, okay? Now, that's using traditional contracts. Then we start to go, well, how do we do things where we've got less than common contracts where real estate agents aren't very familiar with them? So we've got things like vendor finance contracts, where the vendor is actually going to become the bank for us and actually allow us to borrow the funds off them in order to purchase the property. We've got things like joint ventures. So that could be a joint venture with the landowner. That could be a joint venture with a third party who may be cashed up, okay? We've then got option contracts where we could, I guess, control a property under the right but not the obligation to purchase to get it through to development approval stage, add the soft equity, and then allow that soft equity to then potentially fund, I guess, a finance takeout under the commercial side of things. Now, so all of these alternative ways of actually acquiring the property or controlling the property then gives us a whole bunch of tools in our tool bag, okay? So we've got a hammer, a spanner, a shifter, some pliers, and the like. And as we come into any one given situation, we know that all of these tools exist. We then meet our vendor, and the vendor says, okay, these are the circumstances that I'm trying to sell under. And what we've then got to do is rummage through our toolbox and go, okay, which of these, which tool have we got in our toolbox that we know how to use? And B, which one suits our personal circumstances and is going to get us through to the other side? Now, what I see many times, and I want to be very clear on this one, is that too many times we've looked at our situation and we go, right, the only tool that I can use is a hammer. And so if the only tool that I can use is a hammer, then I start making everything out there starting to look like a nail. And so it's really important that we understand that we don't force our needs onto the vendor in how we're actually going to acquire the deal. Instead, we want to flip it around, okay? We want to find out, why are they selling, okay? We want to understand the real reason why they're selling, not the superficial one that they may actually be talking about. So typically, they're wanting to sell because they're wanting to downsize, or they're wanting to move on, empty nesters or things like that. But in doing so, there's usually some, I guess, underlying needs that sit underneath that. So that's their want, okay? I want to downsize, or I want to upgrade to a new property, but the need sits underneath that, okay? Now, each person is going to have a different need, and it's our job to try and work that out. And if we can understand what that need is, then when we rummage around in our toolbox, we're going to be able to find something that is going to suit that particular vendor and that particular circumstance. So some of the things that you want to consider from a needs perspective, okay, is things like when they say that they're moving out, are they downsizing or are they upgrading, okay? Now, that's important to understand, because it might be that the product that you are creating might be the perfect product that they are actually looking for. Now, it doesn't exist yet, but now that might be a perfect opportunity to say, well, what if we were to offer you one of the product that we create at the tail end of the project? Now, instantly, if you're using that product as part of the purchase price, well, it's impossible to give it to them unless and until you have created it. So it instantly creates this delayed settlement process and also the early access process, because you have to go and get the approvals and then go and construct this before you can actually use that as part payment for the property, okay? So by understanding what they're wanting to do, that makes a lot of sense. You want to understand, do I want to stay in the area or are they going to move out of the area? Again, that might be a perfect opportunity to say, okay, well, if you want to stay in the area or if you want to move out, you might need some time to work out where you're going to go, okay? Maybe you haven't chosen the ultimate house that you're going to actually move to. So if I can give you the flexibility of settlement, that gives you the time with certainty of how much money you've got, and give you the flexibility of knowing, okay, now I know how much money, let's take my time to find exactly where I'm going. Now that's advantageous to us because we need time on our hands. And so by giving them the flexibility of time, it helps them, but it also helps us. Sometimes vendors really want certainty, okay? So they are more than happy to take a lower price point if they get an absolute known outcome. And that's typically because they have already decided, okay, I have already spent my money, I've already bought the next house, okay? So if they've already bought the next house, then they want their certainty now. They want to be able to get their cash, roll it over and go buy the next house, okay? They might be moving into an old age home and they need that cash to actually get in. So you need to understand, do they want certainty, or on the other hand, are they wanting the maximum price? And if they're wanting the maximum price, many times they can actually be flexible in their terms to go, okay, I can give you a little bit more time, I can give you a little bit more access, I might even stay in the deal to some extent and share some of the profits. So if they're after maximum price, you can start to talk to them about, okay, well, these are the things that we can actually help you with in order to get across the line. You need to understand their urgency in actually getting out of the property. So I did touch on this one a little bit, but the urgency to get out may mean that certainty and lower price points are their primary driver just to get the known outcome, okay? If they've got plenty of time on their hands, then that's going to give you the ability to say, well, we can give you an uplift on doing that, okay? Then you want to understand, I guess, their risk appetite, okay? So are they really just wanting something simple? They want simplicity of the deal because they don't want to be, they're easily confused? Or have they been around the block a few times? Are they capable to understand a more complex deal structure? Is that something that if you propose something like a joint venture or an option contract or something like that, that they might actually take that on board because they actually understand how it works, okay? So when you understand the vendor's needs and where they sit in all those criteria, now you can start to rummage around in your toolbox and you go, okay, well, given the fact that they've got, that they want maximum price and they're quite capable of dealing with complex deal structures and they've got plenty of time on their hands, maybe now I might start to propose either a joint venture or an option contract, okay? And put that in front of them and say, look, you know, this is how we can actually give you maximum price. If they have plenty of time, want maximum price, but they want simplicity, then you go, okay, well, I can't do an option contract and I can't do a joint venture because that's a complex deal. But from a simplicity point of view, perhaps I could do a delayed settlement with early access. Okay, so when you start to mix and match all of these things together, you're going to find that you've got quite a few tools in your tool bag that you may not have actually realized, and we're not trying to force them down a particular path that we're actually thinking. What I would say in doing this approach is that every now and then you're going to find, hey, I've got a deal that's developable and I've got a deal that's profitable and I've negotiated the terms that the vendor is happy with. It just doesn't fit my criteria. Well, that doesn't mean throw the deal away. You're sitting in a network that's got well over 11,000 people in there. And so almost certainly one of those guys would love to have an introduction to the deal. And I'm sure they'd be happy to pay a deal finding fee if you could prove it's both developable and profitable. And so that's one of the no money down strategies that you can actually use to say, well, if I wasn't able to secure it under terms that work for me, I can still secure it under terms that work for somebody and get paid for the privilege along the way. So understand your vendor's needs, and that's going to help you massively in understanding your acquisition strategies. Now, as I did touch on before, your acquisition strategies come down to a couple of very high level outcomes. So there's the contractual way that you're going to control the property. Okay, so there's a standard everyday contract. And then there's, I guess, less than standard contracts. So there's things like an option contract or a joint venture contract or vendor finance type contracts. So they're the contractual methods that you may need to do in doing I guess, one of the more creative acquisition strategies. Remember, it's always going to be tactical. It's always going to be for this deal at this time. Where am I situated? What is the vendor's needs in their situation and how that's actually going to work for them. Now, when you understand the needs of the vendor, you're also going to find and identify opportunities to actually acquire properties at a discount. Okay, so there are 5 Ds, the letter D, 5 Ds that I want you to remember. And whenever you hear this, when you're talking to your vendors, they are little switches that should go off in your head to say, okay, there might be an opportunity for a discount here, or there might be an opportunity for creative settlement terms, depending on what's actually happening. So the 5 Ds, divorce, okay? So quite often in going through a divorce, both parties just want out. They want certainty, they want out, okay? There are other times in a divorce, though, that both of them are going, well, this is the one and only chance for me to get the maximum price point because I'm giving half of my assets to the other side. So the same situation being, I guess, the want, okay, I want to sell the property because of divorce, may have a different outcome. I need to get the maximum price point, or I need to get this guy out of my life, okay? So it's important that you get to the need, but the divorce is the trigger that gets you to go, okay, which camp do they actually sit in? Similarly, the next D, death, okay? Same sort of situation where very often you're going to find that people just want the situation over, okay? They want it very clean, they want it very simple, they want it out. Or there might be a whole bunch of, I guess, I can't remember what the word is, but beneficiaries that are looking to maximize the one and only chance that they get to cash in on grandma's, fortune. So again, the situation is not, the situation is the want. It's the need underneath. What is the need and the driver that's actually sitting behind this? Debt, okay? So many times people are having situations where they can't pay their rates, they can't pay their mortgages, things like that. So now we have situations where you can just take over the mortgage and start paying the mortgage on their behalf, or you might be able to buy them out, I guess, relatively cheaply. Again, not necessarily a straight discount, but an opportunity to actually negotiate with them and go, well, we can give you flexible terms. If I just paid your mortgage for the next 12 months and paid the back catalogue, the outstanding mortgage fees that you've got and got the bank off your back, would that help you out? And that might help them to actually clear their name and avoid them going bankrupt and all those sorts of things like that. So many times people will be very, very flexible if you can get the bank off their back for them, okay? Another D, distance, okay? Now, quite often the distance the owner is from the property, or the distance the agent is if they're an out-of-agent area from where the property is listed, means that they don't know or understand that market. So if you've got an interstate owner, quite often they're asleep at the wheel. They don't actually know what they're sitting on. Or if they list through an agent who is out of area, it's their best mate, and they know that their best mate's going to look after them, but the best mate's got to drive 2.5 hours to go do a home open on a Saturday. That best mate's going to go, well, that's actually hard work for me. I actually just want to turn that over, and it's not my area of expertise. So look for things like how far away are the agents and how far away are the owners from the property to see whether or not they're just missing the opportunity that's sitting there. And the last D is disaster. And you'll find that from time to time, there will be natural disasters that actually occur that mean that whole areas and whole geographies suddenly just go on sale. So for example, in areas where there's been floods or areas where there's been cyclones and the whole area has been devastated, there's a lot of people that just want to sell up and get out and move out of town. But 2 or 3 years later, if all the repairs start to happen and life comes back to normality, the market starts to repair itself. Okay, so start to look at those 5 Ds. So divorce, death, debt, distance, and disaster, and know that they are part of your acquisition strategy in looking at things. There's also one final D, which I'll throw out there, and that is developer discounts. And you guys are in a network of other developers. So understand where some developers may not be able to take it all the way through to completion. You may be able to step in and negotiate with that developer and say, well, if I give you certainty of outcome, maybe I can get a discount for picking up that block of land and I can go put a spec home on it. Or maybe I can work with that developer and say, well, you can fund the first half of the project to get it through to development approval stage, and I will fund putting the townhouses on there. Okay, so work with other developers in your network and make sure that you can get maximum outcomes in doing that. Okay. Okay, so that's your acquisition strategies, folks. We've touched on a lot of those in the past, but hopefully we understand now where that's going to help us in moving forward in acquiring the deal in the first place. Okay. Now, in looking at those acquisition strategies, you need to start to understand the most important thing is what is your working equity. Okay. So the working equity is the liquid cash that you have that is going to pay for things like stamp duty. It's going to pay for things like your town planner, your civil engineer, all of your consultants, all those sorts of things. Get all of your applications through. That liquid cash or that working equity is probably the biggest key that you're going to have in trying to control a property and run a deal. Okay, so if you've got plenty of liquid cash, then you may not have a deposit to purchase, and you may not have serviceability to purchase, but that liquid cash means you can run a deal. So now you can look in your toolbox and say, well, if I can create a situation where I can control the property, so that an option contract is one way where you can run the deal because you've got the liquid cash. A JV with the landowner means you're not actually purchasing the property. A JV with another third-party person, means you're not actually purchasing the property. So when you start to look at that and you go, well, where's my shortfall? That liquid cash is kind of king. And even then, you don't have to have the liquid cash. It may be someone else that might have the liquid cash. So they may lend you that cash and you may pay a premium on that rate, but it still might actually make sense for you in actually running the deal. So far we've talked about development strategies and then we've talked about acquisition strategies. Now we're going to talk about exit strategies, okay? So the exit strategy is going to be determined by a whole bunch of things. So the liquidity of your funds right now. So the ability to get the cash back in your pocket, reload and go into your next deal, okay? Your appetite for risk. So can I keep many projects on the go at the same time, or do I need to get out of it really, really fast, get the cash in, reload and get out, okay? The time you're able to commit to the project, that's going to have massive impacts on your ability to do that. Your current skills and confidence to complete is also going to be super critical in determining what your exit strategies might be. So some exit strategies that you might want to consider is you might sell as a development approved site. Actually, let's go back. There's probably one more. So you might just identify the deal and flick it on straight away for a finder's fee. So that means you never even got into the deal. So that is a valid exit strategy, okay? The next one is, well, I can actually control the property. I can actually force a development approval on there, add some soft equity, and then sell it as a development approved site. Depending upon the development strategy that you're using, if you're doing land subdivisions, then you might sell just as vacant land, okay? That's a perfectly valid exit strategy. Equally, you may be able to keep the existing house on the property, which means that you could keep that house there and sell it in an as-is condition, or you might do a renovation on it and sell it as I guess a renovated property on a smaller block of land. You may have the ability to do house and land packages. So that way you package up with a builder what a finished product might look like, package that with your land and sell that as two separate contracts, but then the builder is working with you and you're working with the builder so that you both get a mutually beneficial outcome. You may sell off the plan as a finished product and you then have to just manage the project through to completion, or you may construct it all the way through to the end and you may then sell it as a finished product where people can go into the home, you can stage it, they can look through and touch and feel and interact with the appliances and all those sorts of things, okay? All of those are valid exit strategies. Depending upon the size of the deal, you may also want to consider staging your developments. So you might have a stage 1, a stage 2, a stage 3. So if you're doing, a 20 townhouse project, for example, you might do them in tranches of, 6, and then 8 or something like that to try and get you through to the end. Now that way that allows you to minimize your cash flow, gets the deal actually moving forward. It doesn't create too much stock at the same time. So you're not competing against yourself with the same product. By having 20 on the market, you've only got 6 on the market, those sorts of things. So, and then the last one is you might want to keep some stock. So every single one of those exits, I'm encouraging you to actually look into the end of the deal right at the start and go, what do I need to do to actually get out of here? Okay. Now, if I know what I need to get out, now everything that I'm going to do is going to be planning to make sure that that is actually going to make sense, that it's actually going to be profitable, that it's actually who I'm negotiating with from a sales perspective. All those sorts of things are really important in actually looking at what's there. Okay. Now, so that's it. That's our 3 strategies. So we've got our development strategy, that is what we're going to do. Our acquisition strategy, that's how we're going to control it. And then your exit strategy, which is how you're actually going to exit the deal. Now, in trying to do that and then try and work out our deal size, as I touched on before, working equity is the key. So the ability to have liquid cash and enough liquid cash to actually run the deal. Now, that liquid cash doesn't have to be your cash. I want to be very, very clear. It doesn't have to be yours. But if you can get access to liquid cash, that's going to determine the size of the deal that you are actually able to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a screen here. Give me 2 seconds while I get my screen share button going, and give me 2 seconds. And in sharing this screen, this is a budget that sits on the side. So this is how much money we've actually got sitting in our kitty. And when you've got no liquid cash or no access to liquid cash, then you're going to have to do some form of no money down deal. Okay, you don't really have a choice in doing that. As you start to get between 50 and 100K, you might be doing small chunk deals. As you get over the 100K mark and under the 200K, you're going to do medium chunk deals. And then when you get this 200K mark, now you start to have some choices in your life. You can start to go up this tranche, or you can go up this tranche. Now, if you choose to keep stock and keep yourself a cash flow deal, that means it's going to consume some of your equity, but you're going to keep an asset that then is going to create some ongoing cash flow forever and a day, which means that as you consume some of your equity, the cash then starts to drop down. You may have to go to the bottom of the stack and build up again. Or alternatively, you could reload and then do a larger deal and then a very large deal. And that's, I guess, going to help you to actually get out of the process. Okay, so now I don't think I shared my screen there. My humble apologies. But there's the map. If I wasn't sharing it before, I am sharing it now. So as I said, 0 to 50K, no money down, 50 to 100K, small chunk deals, 100K to 200K, medium chunk deals. And at 200K, that's where you get 2 paths to choose from. Okay, so you've got, I guess, the cash flow opportunity, and then you've got the large chunk deals or the very large chunk deals, depending upon how much cash you've actually got access to. So know that those paths are available to you depending upon where you're sitting. Okay, then depending upon, I guess the size of that chunk deal, that's going to determine, well, is that something that's going to fit for a subdivision? Is that going to fit for a multi-res? Those sorts of things. Now, that can get quite complicated in how that little matrix is going to run, but at a very, very high level, you can do large deals and medium deals and small deals in every single one of those development strategies I mentioned. So whether it be the subdivision, channel, or whether it be the multi-res channel, you can do small, medium, and large. And so I quite often get this, misunderstood that, if you start down a particular path, such as subdivisions, you're going to get to this mythical endpoint. And at that point, you just have to stop and then change tack and go to townhouses. Let me tell you, no, that's not the case. There are plenty of people who do 10 lot land subdivisions, 20 lots, 50 lots, 100 lots. So you can start to scale that stuff quite comfortably. You can also construct in doing subdivisions. Okay, so you can build the finished home. It is very common to actually build the finished home. A lot of people make a lot of livings just building spec homes. So when we talk about subdivisions as a strategy, know that you can construct, okay? But you don't have to construct, so you have some choices there. Whereas when you go townhouses, you're going to have to construct. Once you get to development approval stage, if you want to build one townhouse, you're pretty much going to have to build all of them. You don't have any choices. With subdivisions, you might build one house, you might build 5 houses, you might build 15 houses, you might sell the rest as balance of stock, okay, as vacant land. So just know that those opportunities and options actually then sit with you. Knowing how you're going to exit the deal, okay, this is where it gets really, really interesting, because you've planned in advance. I know what my development strategy is. I know what my acquisition strategy is. I now know what my exit strategy is. I also know what my deal size is. So when you start to do that, we go, okay, where does that development strategy with that exit strategy and that deal size, where does that start to make sense? And what you need to do is start to do some area analysis to say, does my deal size and my deal strategy actually stack? And my exit strategy, does it actually work in this area? There are many, many areas where I can show you where it makes money when you exit at one point and not when you exit at another. For example, if you exit as vacant land, it may make money in one suburb. But if you do a build, it may not make money in that same suburb. There may be other times where you make money when you build, and other times when you don't make money when you sell as vacant land. So given that, I'm going to share with you a little. This is part of my rough cut FISO process that I teach our students in our property development formula program. This rough cut FISO gives us the ability to determine the profitability of the exit point of different exit strategies and developments in an area. And so what we've actually captured here, and we've anonymized the suburbs, but the purchase price, what we would get if we sold as vacant land, what would it cost if we sold the existing house on a smaller lot, if we built a home, what the spec of that home is and what it would actually sell for. So when we put these inputs in, then we've got 4 exit strategies: land only, exit with land on the small lot, so exit the existing house at a small lot plus a vacant block of land, existing house plus a brand new build, and develop and build everything brand new. So these 4 different exit strategies we were able to mathematically work out by understanding what the sale of the finished product was. Now, as a result of that, what we can see is that there are some suburbs where absolutely everything works really, really well. And that in that area, we could do anything we wanted. We'd be very, very happy. But there are other areas where selling as vacant land does not make money when you do a build. And there are other areas where doing a build makes money, but selling as vacant land does not. And so one of the biggest challenges that I see for you guys is that you determine what your development strategy is. That's fantastic. And you determine what your exit strategy is. That's fantastic. But what you don't do is you put the analysis in to say, what does my exit strategy for this development work in this area? And that's something that I see over and over again, where people just fail to do that level of analysis. And as a result of that, they go into areas where they go, I'm banging my head against a wall, like, why does my deal not stack? I can't get it to work. And that's because you just didn't put that assessment in up front to say, is this actually going to work? Okay, now, in doing so, you want to make sure that you know how you're going to exit. That tells you how and when you're going to get your cash in and then reload into your next deal. Now, in looking at your next deal guidelines and say, well, I'm going to start to plan my 5-year roadmap, as I've said before, and map out what my deal sizes are going to be, you want to make sure that you are appropriately scaling in between projects. So from the small project to the medium project to the large project over time. Otherwise, what you'll do is you'll stay on the one deal size. And if you stay on that one deal size, what you've effectively done is just buy yourself a job, okay? So you've swapped your day job for your property development job, and that's not really going to serve you well, okay? So you want to always try to make sure that you go, okay, is this an opportunity for me to step up now, reload that cash that I just got into the next deal and go slightly bigger next time, okay? And you're always looking for opportunities to keep profits. So if you can keep the deal and keep the stock in the deal at the end of it, that means that the equity is always going to be yours and the cash flow is always going to be yours as well. So you want to try and get yourself to the point where you've got those deals coming through that are large enough to actually do that. I always also, in going between deals, I want to make sure that you reward yourself to say, congratulations, did a really good job. Want to make sure that you are benefiting from the process of being a property developer, but don't go and spend all of that on toys, okay? So make sure that you keep enough in the nest egg to reinvest, reload, and then go again, okay? Because if you don't keep that momentum going, you'll start to run out of puff, and then you'll wonder why you never actually got to, I guess, the final project process in the meantime. Okay, so hopefully you guys got plenty out of that. So we covered the 3 different strategies that you're going to need in this process. So there's the development strategy. That is, what am I going to do? That's the rules I'm going to apply to council and how they're going to judge me for my application, okay? There's how I'm going to acquire the deal. That is my circumstances, how much financial resources do I have, how much access have we got to people who may have financial resources, what is the conditions that the vendor is actually trying to sell their property on, and then we try to mix some of our no and low money down opportunities to them to see whether or not we can actually find a deal that is actually going to work, even if we don't have the funds in our own pocket ourselves. Okay, your lack of resources should not stop you from actually being resourceful. I want to be really clear on doing that. And then we looked at your exit strategy. So making sure you're very clear on how you're going to get out of the deal at the very end, because that is then going to formulate, I guess, how and when you're going to reload. It's going to set you up on that path for success. So you can go from deal to deal to deal until you've actually got to the point where you've got deals that are large enough that you can actually get out. So there you have it, folks. I'm going to go take some questions from the audience in a moment. In the meantime, just letting you know that what I've touched on is just a little bit of an insight into our property development formula program, where we go into all of that in a lot more depth. If you have any interest in this at all, just go to propdev.info/apply. So that is propdev.info/apply, and we'd more than happily have a chat with you. Other than that, I guess anyone who's been watching today, if you are interested, we run these almost every weekend on a Sunday at 5 p.m. Brisbane time. So check your local time zones as to how and where that fits. But we have a back catalogue of these on our YouTube channel. So make sure that you go to YouTube and actually search for us. So if you're at YouTube, just search for Property Development Property Developer Network, or you can go propdev.info/YouTube, and that will take you there also. A reminder that we also run some Facebook groups, so our Property Developer Network community, and also our development site, Deal Hub, a great place to get off-market transactions. And there you go, folks. So that's it. I'm going to go to the audience now and see what questions I can actually grab. And I can see a lot of people talking to me. So, whoops. Let's see what questions we got from the audiences. Lots of people saying hi. So I'm just going to do the big shout out to almost everyone, and see where I can find my first statement. Oh, Sean said I did actually share it first go around. So thank you, Sean. Shared it twice. I don't have a single question. I've just got lots of people saying great stuff, which is good, but this is meant to be interactive, folks. This is about you guys asking questions and me being able to try and help you as much as I can on your journey. So I'm going to give you a good 30 seconds to a minute to ask a question, because there's a little bit of a delay between me talking and you guys actually asking. And whilst I'm doing that, I'm going to talk about what we've got coming up in the next couple of weeks in our network. So we've got our next meeting in Sydney. Our monthly meetups are in Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne. Our next one is in Sydney. We've got Adam Barami, who's one of our former students and also a builder. He's talking about in your construction contracts and that sort of thing, how do you actually identify opportunities to reduce construction costs? So opportunities where you're going to see certain things in the build contract that are going to add costs. So he's going to help you out there. And reminder that we have no presentation in Melbourne this week because this month, I should say, because it is Easter holiday. So Easter Saturday. Either way, public holiday, nothing in Melbourne this month. Okay, so I can see a couple of questions coming through. Andy says, hey Rob, great info as usual. Any advice or approaches where the vendor is unwilling to offer a sale guide price? Andy, I guess they're always giving you something. I guess what we've got to try and do is, see what that something is, okay? And quite often what they're trying to do is hold everything close to their chest. What I would say is that you can go in and say, look, I can tell you what the median price is in the area for a property of your size, of your property size and zoning type and that sort of thing. However, there's opportunities where sometimes we can pay above market price points, and so there's a bit of flexibility. What I'd need to do is actually see the property, go through, have a look at the conditions, see what the surrounding area is like, that sort of thing. Perhaps we could sit down and have a cup of tea, but letting you know that the median price is X, but we might be able to do anywhere from 5 to 15% above X, subject to, I guess, the terms that you can work with us on, and we can work that out once we've seen the property. Now, what that does is it sets, it goes the other way around. So rather than setting a price point based by them, you're actually setting a price guide by you. And if they instantly balk and they go, no, we're way out, then you're going to save yourself a lot of time and a lot of hassle in physically going to site. If they do say, okay, I'm interested in that 5 to 15% uplift, well, now that's now a conversation, and you're able to have that over their kitchen table, having already seen inside their property. You can already have a look around and go, okay, I can see they like fishing. I can see they've got a whole bunch of kids. I can, all that sort of stuff. And now you've got conversation starters. You can get them talking. And now we cover a lot of that from negotiation techniques, Andy, and I know that you're in our program. So when you get a little bit further in, we'll talk about that from a negotiations perspective, mate, and give you some insights in how to get some information out of them when they're not wanting to give it. So hopefully that helps, mate. Okay, Sean says, is it raining there? The answer is yes, it is, Sean. It is raining across most of the Eastern Seaboard, my friend. Marty says, when did the Sunday session stop involving Rob with a beer in hand? That is one of the best questions I've had for a long time, Marty. I thought I'd try and be a little bit more sensible, but clearly my reputation precedes me. So I will make sure that I get one for the next time, Marty. So noted, duly noted, my friend. Felicity says, you obviously did an awesome job on explaining the topic. Thank you. Appreciate that, Felicity. So Kay says, what are your thoughts on the property market at the moment? Now, Kay, what I try to do with these Sunday sessions, because I think it looks like you're a first timer, is we try to keep to the topic at hand. So that way we can, I guess, everyone's questions are all about that particular topic today. What I can do is refer you back to a Sunday session I did a couple of weeks ago that talked on this very thing. So if you go to our YouTube channel, you'll actually find that and I guess got some good insights in how to determine how to read the market so that you know where it's actually going. Now, clearly, it's racing at the moment. The question you want to ask yourself is, at what point is it going to stop racing? Okay. And I've given you some insights in how to do that on that previous YouTube Sunday session. So hopefully that helps you out there. Bernard says, how does this work in a booming market? So the kind of what Kay just said, Bernard, go and have a look at that previous YouTube channel. But how do the three strategies work in a booming market? They work exactly the same. Your development strategy is always, what am I going to do? What are the rules that council are going to assess my applications under? The acquisition strategies are always the same. So now the vendor's needs might be changing because the market's moving so fast. So we have to be very cognizant of how we talk to our vendors. But your situation is not going to change because your limited resources are still going to be there. So it's just how you can actually marry those up. And then your exit strategies are always trying to work out, well, where is the market going? When is it going to turn? And how do I make sure that I maximize my return before the market goes against me? Arun says, in a JV scenario with money partners, what is a common type of security? Land and second mortgage, etc. So again, Arun, I'm going to try and keep it on topic. I have done a previous Sunday session on that particular topic on JVs and covered that in quite a great deal of detail. So I think that's going to help you out much better. Go to that YouTube channel and try to find that. But to help you out, I guess it really depends on, I guess, whether that JV partner is providing all of the money or whether or not they're just providing some of the money, and whether or not you're going to another bank. So if you're going to another bank, that bank's going to want first mortgage. So your JV partner has no choice but for second and or caveat. Whereas if your JV partner is providing all the cash, then they may be able to have first mortgage. So Kay says, looks like the property market is going to tip at some point. Well, Absolutely, Kay. The property market will tip. The question is, when will it tip? Okay, so we've got a few drivers that are pushing us at the moment, which is largely a lot of momentum from the government spending a lot of money. Those stimulus packages are coming to an end, and so the momentum will stay for some time, but then that will slowly dissipate. So the question then really becomes, is there another driver that's going to kick in? Now, again, I touched on that in that previous YouTube, so make sure you go back and have a look at that. Stuart says, thanks, Rob, another great session. You're welcome. Andy says, great answer, thank you. Kwan says, how do we determine our property development strategy? Is this purely based on how much cash we have for the first deal? No, Kwan, it's not. It's based on a combination of things. So liquid cash, obviously, is a contributing factor, but you can overcome that by having other people's liquid cash. So that's not an absolute. It comes down to your time, your skills, your risk appetite, how long you can wait for payday. Okay, so if you can't wait 2 years for payday, then a townhouse project is probably not what you're looking for, because it's going to take too long. If you really need, I guess, some sort of cash return inside the first 12 months, then it might be something down the subdivision path, for example. Okay, your risk profile, if you are happy to back yourself, then going into a $2, $3, $4, $5 million deal might be okay. So townhouses might work. If you're not, then you might want something smaller, and so you might want, I guess, to start very, very much smaller in the process. So there's a few things that go into there, mate. We do walk through how to pick your development strategy for anyone who does come into our property development formula program to try and help them out. But they're kind of the guiding lights that I can say to you is time, how much time you've got to run the deal, how long you can wait to actually receive the cash, your risk appetite, and also the skill set that you've got right here and right now, mate, as to whether or not you actually want to take that on. Now, what I can say is all paths are possible. Okay, there's nothing that says you can't go down either path, but some of us just have an inherent desire to go down a particular path because that's the outcome that we want to see. Others want to go down a different path, and both paths are right. Every development strategy will work. I'm telling you, they all work. They just don't work everywhere, and so your guide is to then work out where is that development strategy going to work. So Anna says, I believe that the planning rules have changed in the Northern Beaches, meaning that some suburbs can now be duplexed. What's the best way to learn about these? Do I just need to trawl through the Northern Beaches Council website, or am I better off getting a meeting with a town planner or planning firm in the local area? So Anna, I'm going to answer that in a very generic way, because there's actually 537 councils in Australia. And so that what you're talking about happens quite a lot. Okay, the planning rules are constantly being updated and evolved. And so every time council does that, they go through a process. And so generally they will write the internal policies themselves. Then they'll go out for public consultation. They'll get feedback from the public. When they've got feedback from the public, they'll then revise those thoughts. Then they'll take that to state government to then get that endorsed. State government may give them some feedback. They may go back for a second round of public consultation before they finalise on the plan. So that multi-stage process generally has some visibility when you go to the council website, where they're talking about draft plans that are actually coming in force. Now, some councils are very visible with that, and so they'll publicly advertise where those are. Others are less than visible, and you need to call the duty planner and say, hey, what's actually going on? Or talk to the local private town planning firm, like you said, and say, hey, do you know anything about what's going on? But when you start to become a development strategy expert, and when you start to become an area expert, you're going to start to have your finger on the pulse on that in your particular area. So I would say, go to the Northern Beaches Council website and have a look for those draft policies to see what's actually coming in. And if not, find yourself a town planner in the area, and they should be able to help you out. So I hope that helps, Anna. And other than that, Sean says, great session as always. Thank you. So given that there's no more questions, folks, I'm going to call that a wrap. Thank you very much for joining me once again. And we will see you next week for our next Sunday session. Bye for now. Oh, I've got to find my end button. Where to go? Okay, bye.